The morning sun streamed through the blinds as Special Agent Maya Johnson sipped her coffee in the small apartment she'd called home for the past year and a half. She glanced at the cheap nursing scrubs hanging by the door, her cover identity's uniform. Today marked day 547 of her undercover mission, but who was counting? She was. Maya ran her fingers over the hidden compartment in her bedside table where she kept her real badge. Being a DEA agent undercover meant living a double life that drained her in ways she never expected. She missed her real apartment, her dog now staying with her sister and using her actual name. Just a few more months, she whispered to herself, a daily ritual that kept her focused. The Riverside Police Precinct had been under suspicion for years. Drug evidence disappearing from lockup, seized money vanishing, dealers mysteriously avoiding arrests while their competitors got taken down. The pattern was clear to anyone looking closely, but these cops were smart. They'd managed to dodge 3 previous investigations. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her handler, Andy Wilson. Weekly check-in, still on for coffee at 3. This meant she would drop by the local coffee shop where they could briefly speak without raising suspicion. Andy would pretend to be an old friend from nursing school. Maya got dressed, carefully selecting clothes that matched her cover story, nothing too fancy, nothing too shabby. Just right for a nurse making decent but not great money. She pinned on her fake hospital ID badge and headed out. On her drive to work at the local clinic, a real job the DEA had arranged as part of her cover, Maya spotted a police cruiser in her rearview mirror. Her heart jumped before she reminded herself to stay calm. It was Officers Rick Brennan and Tom Martinez, the 2 cops at the center of her investigation. They'd been watching her for weeks now. Maya had made sure they noticed her visiting her cousin's place in the neighborhood they controlled. Her so-called cousin didn't exist, but the apartment the DEA rented certainly did, along with the small-time marijuana dealer persona they'd created for this fictional relative. The cruiser followed her for 3 blocks before turning off. Maya breathed easier, but knew this was part of the game. They were testing her, watching for signs of nervousness that might reveal she wasn't who she claimed to be. At the clinic, Maya went through the motions of checking in patients and taking vitals. Her nursing training had been brief but intense, enough to perform the basics convincingly. Her co-workers liked her but found her somewhat private, which suited her cover perfectly. During her lunch break, she called Andy from a secure line in her car. "They're getting more interested," she said quietly. "Followed me this morning." "Good," Andy replied. "That's what we want. Remember, we need solid evidence of them actually planting drugs or taking bribes. Suspicion isn't enough." "I know," Maya said, frustration edging her voice. 18 months, and we're still building the case. These guys are careful." "And that's why we sent our best," Andy reminded her. "The department has tried to crack this case for years. Nobody got as close as you have." Maya ended the call and leaned back in her seat. The weight of the assignment pressed down on her. She wasn't just trying to catch dirty cops, she was trying to clean up a system that had failed too many people in this community. Later that afternoon, Maya stopped by the convenience store near her apartment. As she paid for a bottle of water, she noticed Brennan and Martinez pull into the parking lot. This wasn't a coincidence. They'd been watching her patterns, learning her routines. She took a deep breath as she stepped outside, pretending not to notice them until Officer Brennan called out. "Excuse me, miss." "Got a minute?" Maya turned, her face showing just the right amount of surprise and caution, the look of someone with a small connection to illegal activity, but nothing serious. "Yes, officer," she replied, her heart pounding while her face remained perfectly composed. "Haven't we seen you around Pine Street? Visiting someone over there regularly?" The trap was being set, and Maya was ready to step right into it, carefully, deliberately, and according to plan. The game had begun. Maya stood outside the convenience store, her shopping bag hanging from her wrist as Officers Brennan and Martinez approached. The evening air felt suddenly thicker. She'd prepared for this moment for weeks, but now that it was happening, her mouth went dry. "Yeah, I visit my cousin there sometimes," she answered, letting a hint of nervousness show in her voice. Not too much, just enough to seem like someone with minor secrets, not major ones. Officer Brennan, the taller of the 2 with a crew cut that looked too tight for his round face, stepped closer. Your cousin. And what's your cousin's name? Tyler Johnson, Maya said, the fake name rolling off her tongue easily after months of practice. He's lived there about 2 years. Martinez, shorter but broader than his partner, circled around to stand slightly behind her. A classic intimidation tactic she recognized from her own training. Tyler Johnson, he repeated, writing nothing down. And what does Tyler do for a living? Maya shifted her weight, calculated hesitation. He works odd jobs, construction mostly. Construction, Brennan echoed with a smirk. That pays well enough for that apartment. Maya gave a small shrug. I don't ask about his money. We're not that close. The officers exchanged glances, a silent communication Maya had been watching for. These two had worked together long enough to develop their own language. We've had some complaints about activities in that building, Martinez said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Drug-related. Really? Maya widened her eyes, then looked down quickly. I don't know anything about that. You sure about that? Brennan asked, tilting his head. Because people who know things and help us out, we remember those people when they need favors. And there it was, the first hint of what these officers were really about. Not enforcing the law, but finding people they could use, threaten, or extort. I'm just a nurse, Maya said softly. I work at Riverside Clinic. I don't know anything about drugs. A nurse. That's good, honest work, Martinez said, his tone suggesting anything but respect. What time do you finish your shifts usually? The question seemed casual, but Maya knew they were learning her routine, figuring out when she was vulnerable. It varies, mostly evenings. Brennan pulled out a card and held it out to her. Well, Nurse Johnson, if you happen to notice anything when you visit your cousin, anything at all, you give us a call. We take care of people who help us. Maya took the card, careful to let her fingers tremble slightly. Thank you, officers. But I really don't think. Just keep it, Martinez cut her off. You'd be surprised what people notice when they start paying attention. As they walked back to their patrol car, Maya tucked the card into her pocket and continued toward her apartment. She didn't look back, but she could feel their eyes on her. Once safely inside, she locked her door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. She pulled out her hidden phone, not the one they might track if they ran her name, and sent a coded text to Andy, made contact. They took the bait. For the next few weeks, Maya established a pattern. She visited her cousin's apartment every Thursday evening, sometimes carrying groceries, sometimes empty-handed. Twice she spotted the same patrol car parked down the street. Once, at the local diner where she sometimes ate breakfast, she saw Officer Martinez watching her from a booth across the room. They were testing the waters, seeing if she was what she appeared to be. On her fourth visit to the fake cousin's apartment, Maya deliberately timed her exit to coincide with Brennan and Martinez driving by. She carried a small paper bag with nothing more suspicious than sandwich ingredients inside. Brennan rolled down his window as the cruiser slowed beside her. How's your cousin doing? Fine, Maya answered, clutching the bag a little tighter, just enough to notice. That's good, he said, his eyes dropping to the bag then back to her face. Remember what we talked about? If you see anything unusual. I remember, Maya nodded. As they drove away, Maya allowed herself a small, private smile. The hook was set. The officers thought they'd found someone they could manipulate, someone connected enough to the neighborhood to be useful, but scared enough to be controlled. Little did they know she was counting on exactly that. That night, in her apartment with the shower running to mask any sounds from potential listening devices, Maya made her real report to Andy. They getting bolder, she whispered. Asking more questions. Watching me more openly. They think I'm hiding something small, and they think they can use that to control me. Perfect, Andy replied. Keep it up. We need them to try to recruit you, not just threaten you. That's when we'll get the evidence we need. Maya ended the call and closed her eyes. The hard part was just beginning. These officers hadn't survived this long by being careless or trusting. They would test her, push her, maybe even try to scare her before bringing her into their operation. She was ready for all of it. She had to be. 3 months had passed since Maya first caught the attention of Officers Brennan and Martinez. The air had turned cooler and leaves crunched under her feet as she walked home from her shift at the clinic. Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she'd come to recognize. Officer Brennan's personal cell. Need to talk. Your place. 30 minutes. Maya's heart raced, but she kept her pace steady. This was unusual. They typically approached her in public places, never at her apartment. Something had changed. Inside her apartment, she quickly activated the hidden cameras the DEA had installed months ago. Tiny lenses disguised as screw heads, smoke detector components, and light fixtures would capture whatever was about to happen from multiple angles. 28 minutes later, a sharp knock came at her door. Maya took a deep breath and opened it to find Brennan standing there alone. That was unexpected. Martinez usually did the talking. "Officer," she said, feigning surprise. "Is everything okay?" "We need to talk," he said, pushing past her into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. His eyes scanned the room, taking in details. Nice place for a nurse's salary. Maya shrugged. "I don't spend much on anything else." Brennan walked around slowly, picking up a photo frame, examining books on her shelf. He was looking for something, or making a show of it. "Your cousin Tyler," he finally said, turning to face her. "He's been busy lately." Maya stiffened. "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb," Brennan snapped. "We know he's dealing, and not just small stuff anymore." This was a test. The DEA had carefully crafted the fake cousin's activity to appear as if he was slowly expanding his fictional drug business. "I told you, I don't ask about his business," Maya said, letting her voice shake slightly. "I just visit him sometimes." "Yeah, well, his business is becoming our business," Brennan said, stepping closer. "And that makes you our business too." Maya backed up a step. "I don't understand." "It's simple," Brennan said. "Your cousin's operation is growing in our neighborhood. Nothing grows in our neighborhood without our say-so." "Are you saying?" "I'm saying your cousin owes protection money," Brennan cut her off. "And since we can't seem to catch him at home, you're going to deliver the message." Maya swallowed hard. "I'm not involved in any of that." "You are now," Brennan said flatly. $500 by Friday, or we raid his place. With what we find, he'll do 10 years minimum." "What you find?" Maya asked, then immediately regretted it. Brennan smiled coldly. "Yeah, what we find." The implication hung in the air between them. They would plant evidence if necessary. Maya had just gotten her first direct confirmation of their methods. "I don't have that kind of money," she protested. "Then get it from Tyler," Brennan said. "Tell him this is just the first payment. Price of doing business." When Brennan left, Maya sat on her couch, thoughts racing. This was exactly what the operation needed, direct evidence of extortion. But she knew what would come next. When the fictional Tyler refused to pay, they would make good on their threat. She wasn't wrong. 3 days later, after she'd reported to her handlers that she wouldn't deliver any payment, she returned from work to find her door slightly ajar. Heart pounding, Maya pushed it open slowly. Her apartment had been searched, professionally enough that an ordinary person might not notice, but she spotted the subtle signs. Drawers closed not quite right, books slightly out of alignment on shelves. And there, on her kitchen counter, a small plastic bag of white powder that hadn't been there before. Maya didn't touch it. Instead, she took out her phone as if calling a friend and quietly spoke the code phrase that would alert her DEA team. "My sink is leaking again. Can you believe it?" 20 minutes later, as she sat in her car watching her apartment building, a patrol car pulled up. Brennan and Martinez stepped out, followed by 2 other officers she recognized from the precinct. Maya's hand trembled as she started her car. She could drive away now, abort the mission before they found the drugs they'd planted. Her handler had given her that option. But 18 months of work would be wasted. The corrupt cops would continue destroying lives in this neighborhood. She shut off the engine just as Brennan spotted her car and gestured for the other officers to approach. Taking a deep breath, Maya stepped out, hands visible. "Maya Johnson," one of the unfamiliar officers called. "We have a warrant to search your apartment." "A warrant?" she asked, plain confused. "For what?" "Anonymous tip," Martinez said with a smirk. "Someone reported drug activity at your address." As they handcuffed her, more roughly than necessary, Maya caught Brennan's eye. His expression was clear. This is what happens when you don't play ball. Little did he know, he was playing right into her hands. The holding cell was cold, colder than Maya had expected. She sat on the hard metal bench, her back against the concrete wall, counting the hours since her arrest. 6 hours and 23 minutes. Her wrists still bore the red marks from handcuffs that had been deliberately tightened one notch too far. Procedure, Officer Martinez had said with a smirk when she winced during the ride to the station. Now, alone in the cell, Maya discreetly examined the bruises forming on her arms where they had gripped her too tightly while escorting her inside. Evidence. Everything was evidence. When the officers had stepped away, Maya had carefully extracted the microcamera from inside her watch, a device smaller than a pencil eraser but capable of taking high-resolution photos. She quickly photographed her wrists, her arms, and the inside of the holding cell before hiding the camera again. A female officer Maya hadn't seen before approached the cell. "Johnson, your lawyer's here." Maya nodded, standing up slowly. She hadn't called a lawyer, which meant the DEA had sent their legal liaison right on schedule. The interview room was small and smelled of stale coffee. A man in a slightly rumpled suit stood as she entered. "Ms. Johnson, I'm Brian Lee from the Public Defender's Office." Once the door closed, leaving them alone, his demeanor shifted subtly. "Agent Johnson," he said quietly, leaning forward. "I'm Paul Winters, DEA Legal. Are you okay?" Maya nodded. "They planted the drugs exactly where we predicted. Top left kitchen cabinet. About 2 ounces of cocaine, I think." Paul opened his briefcase and slid a legal pad toward her. "Write down everything, the exact words Brennan used when he came to your apartment demanding protection money, how many officers were present during your arrest, all of it." While Maya wrote, Paul filled her in on what was happening behind the scenes. "Director Wilson has a small team from Internal Affairs working with us now. 3 officers they trust completely. They're tracking financial records for Brennan, Martinez, and 4 other officers from their precinct. Found some interesting deposits that don't match their salaries." Maya glanced up. "How much?" "Brennan deposited $12,000 cash last month. Martinez bought a boat 3 months ago, paid cash." Maya raised an eyebrow. "On a patrol officer's salary? That's bold." "They've been doing this a long time," Paul said. "They think they're untouchable." Maya finished writing and slid the pad back. "What's next?" "They'll process you overnight. Tomorrow you'll see Judge Watkins for arraignment. He's been briefed, just enough to know this is a federal operation, not the details." "And the prosecutor's office?" "They don't know," Paul said, shaking his head. "They're building a case against you with the evidence Brennan and Martinez provided. ADA Helen Chen is handling it personally." Maya frowned. "I've heard that name before." "You should have. She has a 98% conviction rate, partly because of cases built by Brennan and Martinez. We're looking into whether she's involved or just been fed solid-looking cases built on planted evidence." Outside the interview room, a door slammed. Paul immediately switched back to his public defender persona, raising his voice slightly. "Ms. Johnson, these are serious charges. I'll do what I can, but you need to be prepared for the possibility of significant jail time." The door opened and Officer Brennan leaned in. "Time's up." As Maya was led back to her cell, she caught Brennan watching her with a satisfied expression. He thought he'd broken her, taught her a lesson for not delivering his message. He had no idea that with every passing hour, more evidence was being gathered against him. In her cell, Maya lay on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. The hardest part wasn't the discomfort or the humiliation of being processed like a criminal. It was maintaining her cover when every instinct screamed to reveal who she really was. Across town, Director Andy Wilson sat in a dimly lit office with Lieutenant Patricia Rivera from Internal Affairs. Surveillance photos of Officers Brennan and Martinez covered the walls. Financial records, meeting logs, transcripts of Maya's reports over the past 18 months. "Your agent is taking a huge risk," Rivera said, examining the photo of Maya being led into the station in handcuffs. "If they realize who she is while she's in custody." "Maya knew the risks when she took the assignment," Andy replied, though concern lined his face. "She's one of our best. If anyone can maintain cover under pressure, it's her." Rivera nodded, turning to the whiteboard where they had mapped the corruption network. Based on her intel and our financial investigation, we've confirmed 5 officers directly involved, plus 3 more we suspect. The question is, how high does this go? Andy pointed to a name at the top of their chart, Captain David Reynolds. Maya reported seeing Reynolds meeting privately with Brennan twice. No evidence he's directly involved in the drug operations, but he's been shutting down complaints against these officers for years. Could be protecting his team, could be taking a cut. River amused. We need more. That's why we're letting this play out, Andy said, checking his watch. By this time tomorrow, Maya will be in court. That's when we start the next phase. Back in her cell, Maya finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. In her dreams, she wasn't undercover anymore. She was just herself, badge on her belt, walking freely through the DEA offices, laughing with colleagues. She was awakened by the sound of keys jangling. A different officer stood at her cell door. "Get up, Johnson. You're seeing the judge in 2 hours. Time to get processed for court." Maya sat up slowly, her resolve hardening. In just a few hours, Officers Brennan and Martinez would stand in court, swear an oath, and lie about her under penalty of perjury, adding another federal crime to the growing list of charges they didn't yet know were coming their way. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. The courthouse hallway buzzed with morning activity. Lawyers clutched coffee cups, court officers directed people to their assigned rooms, and families waited anxiously on hard wooden benches. Maya sat quietly, handcuffs binding her wrists, an officer standing guard beside her. She wore the orange jumpsuit they'd given her that morning, a size too large, making her look smaller than she was. Through the crowd, she spotted Officers Brennan and Martinez arriving. They were dressed in their formal uniforms, badges gleaming, looking nothing like the men who had threatened her in her apartment days earlier. They nodded to the prosecutor, a sharp-dressed woman carrying a sleek leather portfolio, before taking seats in the hallway. Neither looked at Maya directly, but she could feel their satisfaction radiating across the hall. All rise for the Honorable Judge Raymond Watkins. Maya was led into courtroom 3B along with the other parties. She kept her eyes down, shoulders slightly hunched, body language that suggested defeat. As she passed the officers, Martinez smirked. She'd given them exactly what they wanted. A frightened woman who appeared broken by the system. Judge Watkins, a man in his 60s with silver hair and reading glasses perched on his nose, looked down at the paperwork before him. Only he and Paul, her public defender, knew what was really happening. To everyone else, the court reporter, the bailiff, the prosecutor, and especially Officers Brennan and Martinez, this was just another drug case. Case number 247 CR, Commonwealth versus Maya Johnson, the clerk announced. Charges of possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. The prosecutor stepped forward. Helen Chen for the Commonwealth, Your Honor. We're seeking continued detention. The defendant was found with a substantial quantity of cocaine in her apartment following an anonymous tip. Paul stood beside Maya. Brian Lee, Public Defender's Office, representing Ms. Johnson. We request release on personal recognizance. My client has no prior record, is employed as a nurse at Riverside Clinic, and has strong ties to the community. Judge Watkins peered over his glasses. I'll hear from the arresting officers. Officer Brennan approached the stand first, swearing to tell the truth with his right hand raised. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. Officer Brennan, the prosecutor began, please tell the court what led to the search of Ms. Johnson's apartment. Brennan cleared his throat. We received an anonymous tip through our drug hotline that Ms. Johnson was storing narcotics in her apartment. Given the specific nature of the tip, we obtained a search warrant. And what did you find during this search? Approximately 2 ounces of cocaine hidden in a kitchen cabinet, along with small plastic bags and a digital scale, consistent with distribution, not personal use. Maya watched Brennan lie under oath with practiced ease. He'd probably done this dozens of times before, ruining lives without a second thought. The prosecutor nodded, satisfied. And Officer Martinez, was there anything in your prior interactions with Ms. Johnson that suggested she might be involved in drug activity? Martinez took the stand next. Yes, ma'am. We'd observed Ms. Johnson making regular visits to a known drug area. When questioned, she admitted to visiting a cousin there, but became nervous when asked about him. More lies. Maya felt a flash of anger, but kept her expression neutral. After both officers testified, Judge Watkins looked at Paul. "Does the defense wish to cross-examine?" Paul stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Just a few questions." He approached Officer Brennan first. "Officer, you testified that you received an anonymous tip about my client. Did you record that call as per department protocol?" Brennan shifted slightly. "The system was down that day." "I see," Paul said. "And the search warrant, who signed that?" "Judge Harris." Paul nodded, making a note. "And Officer Martinez, you mentioned prior interactions with Ms. Johnson. Were those documented in your daily reports?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed Martinez's face. "Some were informal encounters, sir." Paul continued asking questions that seemed routine but highlighted inconsistencies in their story. The officers began exchanging glances, sensing something wasn't right. "Your Honor," Paul finally said, "before we proceed further, I need to approach the bench with a matter of extreme importance." The judge nodded. "Counsel, approach." Paul and the prosecutor walked to the judge's bench. Their conversation was hushed, but Maya could see the prosecutor's expression change from confusion to shock. Judge Watkins nodded gravely, then spoke to his clerk. "We're going to take a 15-minute recess. Officers, please remain in the courtroom." As the judge left, Paul returned to Maya's side. The prosecutor stood frozen, staring at her case notes with a stunned expression. "What's happening?" Officer Brennan called out, rising from his seat. "Your Honor." The courtroom doors opened. 4 men and 2 women in suits entered, followed by Director Andy Wilson. They moved with purpose, badges visible on their belts or hanging from chains around their necks. "What the hell is this?" Martinez demanded, standing now. Andy approached the officers, his expression stern. "Officers Brennan and Martinez, I'm Director Wilson with the Drug Enforcement Administration. This courtroom is now secured." Maya stood up straight, her demeanor completely transformed. "Gentlemen," Andy continued, "you've just committed perjury in a federal investigation. The defendant, you know, as Nurse Maya Johnson, is actually Special Agent Maya Johnson of the DEA, who has been undercover investigating police corruption in your precinct for 18 months. The color drained from Brennan's face. Martinez looked from Maya to the door, as if calculating his chances of escape. "Don't even think about it," one of the federal agents said, moving to block the exit. The prosecutor approached Andy, her voice low. "Director, I had no idea." "We know, Ms. Chen," he replied. "We'll need your cooperation as we sort this out." Maya finally spoke, her voice clear and confident, nothing like the frightened woman she'd been pretending to be. "Officers Brennan and Martinez, you're both under arrest for evidence tampering, extortion, civil rights violations, and perjury." As federal agents handcuffed the stunned officers, Maya caught Brennan's eye. The look of shock and betrayal on his face was worth every minute of the 18 months she'd spent building this case. The tables had turned. Now they were the ones in handcuffs, and she was finally free. News of the courtroom revelation spread like wildfire through the police department and the neighborhood. Maya sat in a conference room at the federal building, watching through the window as reporters gathered outside. After 18 months living under a fake identity, she could finally be herself again. "How does it feel to be back in normal clothes?" Andy asked as he entered the room with 2 cups of coffee. Maya looked down at her DEA windbreaker and dark jeans. "Weird. Good weird, but still weird." She accepted the coffee gratefully. After nearly 2 days in a holding cell, followed by the intensity of the courtroom scene, exhaustion was setting in. But there was no time to rest. "We've got 5 officers in custody now," Andy said, spreading photographs across the table. "Brennan and Martinez, of course, plus Officers Taylor, Rodriguez, and Patel, who were part of their operation." Maya nodded. "What about Captain Reynolds?" "Still investigating. We found payments to an offshore account, but we need to connect it to him directly." Andy paused. "The chief of police submitted his resignation this morning." "Was he involved?" "Unclear. But he either knew and did nothing, or was completely oblivious to a major corruption ring in his department." Either way, Andy trailed off with a shrug. A knock at the door interrupted them. A woman in a sharp suit entered, carrying a leather portfolio similar to the one the prosecutor had carried. Agent Johnson, I'm Lisa Washington from the U.S. Attorney's Office. I'll be leading the prosecution against the officers. They shook hands, and Lisa took a seat at the table. First, let me say your work on this case has been extraordinary, Lisa began. 18 months undercover in those conditions, not many agents could have pulled that off. Maya shrugged. Just doing my job. Well, your job has given us enough evidence to potentially take down the entire corruption network. Lisa opened her portfolio. We've issued warrants for 3 more officers based on the financial evidence and your testimony. But we need to move quickly while we have momentum. For the next 2 hours, they went through Maya's evidence piece by piece. The recorded conversations, the photos of her bruised wrists, the surveillance footage from her apartment showing Brennan planting the drugs, the financial records showing unexplained cash deposits coinciding with drug busts throughout the district. What about the people they framed? Maya asked. There must be dozens of innocent people in prison because of these officers. Lisa nodded grimly. We've identified 17 cases so far that relied heavily on evidence provided by this group. The DEA's office is reviewing each one. Only 17, Maya frowned. That's just the obvious ones. There could be many more. Lisa closed her portfolio. This is going to be a long process, Agent Johnson. 3 days later, Maya found herself in a wood-paneled room facing 9 solemn faces. The grand jury listened intently as she detailed her undercover operation from beginning to end. And Officer Brennan stated explicitly that they would plant evidence if your cousin didn't pay. The lead juror asked. Yes, Maya confirmed. His exact words were what we find. When I asked about that, he made it clear they would plant drugs if necessary. Maya testified for nearly 6 hours. When she finally emerged from the grand jury room, Andy was waiting with a bottle of water and a supportive nod. How'd it go? He asked. They listened, Maya said simply. They really listened. The grand jury returned indictments against all 5 officers the next day. Additional charges followed for 3 more officers based on the financial investigation. Captain Reynolds resigned before he could be indicted, but the investigation into his involvement continued. As the case expanded, more victims of the corruption ring came forward. People who had lost years of their lives to prison sentences based on planted evidence. Families torn apart by false accusations. Business owners who had paid protection money to avoid being targeted. Maya met with some of them, sitting in a community center in the heart of the neighborhood where she'd spent those 18 months. An elderly woman gripped her hand tightly. My grandson, she said, eyes brimming with tears. 4 years he's been in prison, all because he refused to work as an informant for those officers. We're reviewing his case, Maya promised. The truth is going to come out now. A young man approached her next. You lived here all that time? Right under their noses. Maya nodded. I had to understand what was happening, how they operated, who they targeted. Weren't you scared? He asked. The question gave Maya pause. Fear had been her constant companion during the operation, not just fear of being discovered, but fear of failing the community that needed someone to expose the truth. Yes, she answered honestly. But sometimes being scared and doing something anyway is how change happens. Back at the office, the paperwork seemed endless. Each report Maya filed helped build the case stronger, but also reminded her of the human cost of what these officers had done. Andy found her late one night, still at her desk reviewing case files. You need to rest, he said gently. The preliminary hearing is tomorrow. Maya rubbed her eyes. I know. I just keep thinking about all the people still waiting for justice. 17 cases identified so far, but there are more out there. And we'll find them, Andy assured her. But Rome wasn't built in a day, and corruption rings aren't dismantled in a week. Maya nodded, gathering her things. As she headed for the door, Andy called after her. Hey, Maya? What you did, it matters. Don't forget that. She smiled tiredly. I won't. The next morning, as she prepared to face the corrupt officers again in court, Maya thought about all the lives that had been damaged by their actions, and all the lives that might now have a chance at justice. Whatever happened next, that made everything she'd endured worthwhile. 6 months after the courtroom revelation, Maya stood in a wood-paneled room in Washington, D.C., trying not to fidget as a crowd of people watched her. The Attorney General adjusted his glasses before reading from the citation in his hands. For extraordinary courage, unwavering commitment to justice, and exceptional service to the American people, it is my honor to present Special Agent Maya Johnson with the Distinguished Service Medal. Camera flashes lit up the room as the medal was placed around her neck. Maya smiled politely, though public recognition had never been her goal. Her mind drifted to the 17 people who had been released from prison so far, their convictions overturned due to her investigation. That was the real victory. Later that evening, at a small gathering of DEA colleagues, Andy raised a glass to Maya, who reminded us all what this job is really about. Maya accepted their congratulations but slipped away early. Award ceremonies made her uncomfortable. She preferred action to accolades. The next morning, she sat in a new office, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked. The sign on her door read, "Special Task Force on Police Accountability." After the Riverside case made national headlines, the DEA had created this unit with Maya as its head. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A young agent named Ryan stood in the doorway. "The files you requested from Chicago just arrived," he said, placing a thick folder on her desk. "Similar pattern to what you found in Riverside. Targeted arrests in specific neighborhoods, evidence disappearing from lockup, unexplained financial transactions." Maya nodded, opening the folder. "Let's dig in." Though she couldn't return to undercover work, her face had been in too many newspapers, she could now train others to spot the patterns she'd learned to recognize. Corruption left fingerprints if you knew where to look. Meanwhile, back in Riverside, changes were happening. Maya visited occasionally, watching from a distance as the community she'd lived in for 18 months began to transform. The new police chief, a woman named Diane Powell, had implemented mandatory body cameras for all officers. An independent oversight committee reviewed complaints against the department. Training programs emphasized community engagement over aggressive enforcement. On this visit, Maya parked across from the courthouse where she'd stood in handcuffs 6 months earlier. Today, Officer Brennan was being sentenced after pleading guilty to multiple federal charges. Officer Martinez had gone to trial and received 20 years. Maya didn't go inside. She didn't need to see them in prison jumpsuits to know justice was being served. Instead, she drove to the community center in the heart of the neighborhood. Inside, a group of people sat in a circle of folding chairs. Some were former inmates, others were family members of those still incarcerated. All had been affected by the corruption Maya had helped expose. An older man named Walter, whose son had been released after 3 years of wrongful imprisonment, spotted her first. "There she is," he called out, standing. "The angel who brought my boy home." Maya shook her head, embarrassed by the attention. "I'm no angel, Walter. Just doing my job." "Well, your job gave me my son back," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. A young woman approached next. "My brother's case is being reviewed next month," she said hopefully. "Do you think?" "I can't make promises," Maya said gently. "But every case connected to those officers is getting a fresh look. The truth matters now." As the gathering continued, Maya listened to their stories, not just of injustice, but of hope. Communities that had feared the police for generations were cautiously building new relationships with the reform department. Later, Maya walked alone through the streets where she'd once lived under a false name. She passed her old apartment building, now with new tenants. The convenience store where she'd first been approached by Brennan and Martinez had a fresh coat of paint. Her phone rang, Andy checking in. "How's Riverside?" he asked. "Healing," Maya replied. "Slowly, but it's happening." "And how are you doing?" "Missing the excitement of undercover work." Maya considered the question. The adrenaline rush of living on the edge, of playing a dangerous role, part of her did miss it. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but this is more important. What we're building now will last longer than any single operation." As the sun began to set, Maya made one final stop. The coffee shop where she used to meet Andy for her weekly check-ins during the undercover operation. She ordered her usual and sat at the same table they'd used, watching the neighborhood through the window. A patrol car drove slowly past. The officers inside waved to people on the street, who waved back without fear. Small changes, but significant ones. Maya's new task force already had 3 investigations running in different cities. The work was far from over, but each case they tackled meant one more community could begin to heal from the damage done by those who abused their power. In her rare public statement after receiving her medal, Maya had chosen her words carefully. This was never about taking down cops. It was about protecting the integrity of a system that needs to work for everyone, regardless of who they are or what they look like. 6 months later, sitting in that coffee shop watching the community begin to trust again, Maya knew those weren't just words. Change was happening, one case, one neighborhood, one relationship at a time. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. "Chicago files show something interesting. Can you call when you have a minute?" Maya smiled slightly, finished her coffee and headed back to her car. There was still work to be done.